The twin suns were high in the sky, burning down on the crowded market. The air was thick with the smell of dust, metal, and strange spices. Traders shouted in many alien languages, waving their hands and calling customers to look at their goods. Shiny weapons, rare fabrics, and glowing crystals were displayed on wooden tables and metal stands. But deeper inside the market was a place that made even the noisiest voices grow quieter: the slave quarter. Here the light dimmed under sheets of dirty cloth hanging overhead. Cages stood in long rows, some built from rusted iron, others from strange bones of creatures long dead. Inside them sat beings from many worlds. Some had extra arms, some had scales, and some were so thin they looked like shadows of themselves. Most of them did not look up when people passed by. An old human named Ben walked through the narrow aisle between the cages. His steps were slow but firm, and his eyes studied every face. His beard was white and neatly kept, and his clothes were worn but clean. He carried no weapon, only a small pouch at his belt. The traders watched him carefully. Humans were not rare in this part of the galaxy, but an old human buying slaves alone was unusual. Ben passed cages filled with strong workers. Traders shouted prices for them, praising their muscles and obedience. Ben did not stop. His eyes kept moving, searching for something the others did not see. Near the far corner, where the ground was uneven and the shadows were thick, Ben saw a small figure sitting at the back of a cage. She was an alien woman with pale, almost silver skin. Her clothes were nothing more than rough cloth tied together. Her hair was thin and fell in tangled strands over her face. When she looked up for a moment, Ben saw that her mouth had no teeth. She quickly lowered her head again. The trader standing beside her cage was a large reptilian creature with green scales and gold rings on his arms. He noticed Ben looking and gave a short laugh. "You don't want that one, human," the trader said in broken common speech. "She is weak, no teeth, cannot bite food, cannot work hard, worth nothing." Ben stepped closer to the cage. "What is her name?" he asked. The trader shrugged. "No name. She came from the mines. Been there all her life. She is slow. Others will laugh if you buy her." Ben crouched down so he could see her face better. She kept her eyes on the ground, her thin hands resting on her knees. There were small scars on her wrists where heavy chains had rubbed the skin. "What if I want her?" Ben asked quietly. The trader's eyes widened. "You waste credits. But if you want, I give cheap price. She will not last long anyway." Ben reached into his pouch and took out a small metal box. Inside were silver trade coins, each stamped with the mark of the Galactic Trade Authority. He counted the amount the trader asked for without arguing. "Why her?" the trader asked, shaking his head. "You could buy strong worker for same price." "Because she needs someone," Ben said simply. The trader unlocked the cage and roughly pulled the alien woman to her feet. She stumbled, unsteady from sitting so long. Ben stepped forward and caught her arm gently before she could fall. She flinched at his touch, her eyes wide as if expecting harm. Ben looked at the trader. "Give me the key to her chains." The trader handed it over without care. Ben knelt and unlocked the small metal cuffs around her wrists and ankles. They clattered to the ground. For a moment she just stared at her freed hands as if she could not believe it. "Come," Ben said softly. He offered his hand. She hesitated, then slowly placed her thin fingers in his. The crowd in the market stared as Ben led her away. Some whispered to each other, shaking their heads at the strange sight of an old human walking with a toothless alien woman. A group of younger traders laughed openly, but Ben did not look at them. They passed stalls of food where the smell of roasted grain and cooked meat filled the air. The woman's eyes followed the food, but she did not ask for any. Ben stopped at one of the stalls and bought a small piece of soft bread. He handed it to her. She looked at it, confused. "For me?" she asked in a faint, shaky voice. "Yes." "Eat," Ben said. She bit into the bread slowly, careful with her gums. Her eyes widened at the taste, and for a brief moment her expression softened. She held the bread close, as if afraid it might be taken away. They reached the edge of the market, where Ben's small transport ship was waiting. It was old, with faded paint and a few dents, but it was clean and well kept. He guided her up the ramp and into the main cabin. The door closed behind them, shutting out the noise of the market. Ben poured her a cup of water from a metal jug and placed it on the table. She drank in small sips, still watching him carefully. "You're safe now," Ben said. She did not answer, but her hands stopped shaking. For the first time in many years, she was no longer behind bars. The hum of the ship's engines filled the air as Ben set the controls. The transport lifted smoothly from the dusty market world, leaving behind the noise and heat. Through the small cabin window, the alien woman watched the planet shrink in two, a brown circle surrounded by darkness. She sat in the co-pilot's chair, her thin hands folded in her lap. Ben glanced at her. "We will reach my home in 2 days," he said. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of tone that carried no threat. She gave a small nod but said nothing. Her eyes kept moving, scanning the cabin, the controls, the blinking lights. She had never been in such a place before. Ben left the ship on autopilot and walked to the small galley in the back. He returned with a bowl of warm vegetable stew. The smell filled the cabin. Setting it on the table between them, he said, "Eat slowly." She looked at the food with hesitation. The steam rose in soft curls, and the colors of the stew were bright compared to the gray food she was used to. Picking up the spoon, she took a small sip. Her lips pressed together as she tasted the warmth. For a moment, she closed her eyes as if trying to remember something lost long ago. Ben did not rush her. He sat back and watched her eat at her own pace. After a while, she put the spoon down. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why what?" Ben replied. "Why buy me? You do not know me." Ben thought for a moment before answering. "Because no one should be left in a cage." Her eyes lowered again. She wanted to believe him, but years of harsh treatment had taught her that kindness often came with hidden chains. The next hours passed in silence, except for the gentle hum of the ship. She sat by the window, staring at the stars. They looked endless, stretching in every direction. For the first time, she wondered if somewhere out there was a place where she could belong. When night cycle came, Ben showed her the small sleeping cabin next to his. It had a simple bed, clean blankets, and a small storage locker. "This is yours," he said. She looked at the bed as though it were a strange piece of art. "Mine?" she asked. "Yes. You sleep here. No one will take it from you." She touched the blanket with her fingers. It was soft, nothing like the rough cloth in the mines. She did not lie down right away. She sat on the edge, listening to the steady hum of the engines, feeling the strange comfort of being unchained. Ben returned to the cockpit. He checked the navigation screen, then leaned back in his chair. His thoughts wandered to the market, to the moment he had seen her sitting alone in that shadowed cage. There had been something in her eyes, not just pain, but a quiet strength hidden under it. Hours later, he heard soft footsteps behind him. She stood at the doorway, holding the blanket around her shoulders. "I cannot sleep," she said. "That's normal," Ben replied. "It takes time to feel safe enough to rest." She hesitated, then stepped closer to look at the stars through the front viewport. "There are so many," she whispered. Ben smiled faintly. "Each one is a sun. Some have worlds like yours. Some don't. But all of them are part of the same sky." Her eyes stayed fixed on the endless lights. "I have never seen this before. In the mines, there was only rock." He handed her a warm cup of tea. She wrapped her hands around it, letting the heat sink into her fingers. They stood there in silence, looking out at the galaxy together. The next day, Ben began to teach her small things about the ship. He showed her how to read the basic navigation screen, how to close and open the inner doors, and how to prepare simple meals from the food storage unit. She listened carefully, asking few questions but remembering everything he said. At one point, she asked, "What is your name?" "Ben," he answered. "And you?" She looked down for a moment before replying. "I was called Mira. It means nothing in my old tongue, just a sound the overseers used." Ben nodded. "Then Mira it is, but now it can mean something to you." Mira was quiet, but there was a small change in her eyes. It was not quite trust, but it was the first step toward it. Later that day, a small alarm beeped on the control panel. A warning light flashed red. Ben quickly adjusted the controls, guiding the ship around a drifting field of old mining debris. Large chunks of metal and broken machinery floated in space, left from an abandoned operation. Mira's hands gripped the side of her chair as the ship tilted. "Will it hit us?" she asked. "Not if I steer right," Ben said, his hands moving calmly over the controls. The ship weaved through the debris, passing close enough that she could see scorch marks and twisted steel. When they cleared the last piece, Mira let out a slow breath. "You did not even look afraid," she said. "I've been flying ships for longer than I can remember," Ben replied. "Fear is useful, but panic is not." That night cycle, she returned to her cabin, but this time lay down under the blanket. The hum of the engines no longer felt strange. It felt steady, almost like a heartbeat. She thought about the way Ben had steered the ship, about the stars outside, and about the soft bed beneath her. For the first time in many years, Mira slept without dreams of chains. The journey passed quietly after they cleared the mining debris. Mira spent most of her time in the front cabin, watching the stars. Ben spoke little unless he had something useful to teach her. In those moments, his words were short but clear. She learned how to check the ship's air level, how to store supplies, and how to fasten her seat during travel bursts. When Ben finally said, "We will reach home soon," she thought at first he meant another metal station or market world. But as the ship's sensors beeped softly, a green and blue planet appeared in the distance. It glowed gently against the dark of space, with white clouds swirling over the surface. "That is where I live," Ben said. Mira stared. She had seen planets before, but this one looked alive. Not in the way mines or stations were busy, but alive in a softer way. She leaned forward, her breath quiet, her eyes tracing the lines of rivers and the shapes of oceans. The ship entered, the planet's thin upper air, and the windows brightened with light. The change made Mira blink. She was used to dim tunnels, to lamps that barely lit the ground. This light was warm. They landed on a flat pad near a small village. The air outside shimmered with morning mist. Ben lowered the ramp, and a soft breeze carried the smell of fresh grass and distant flowers into the cabin. Mira hesitated at the top of the ramp. "Go ahead," Ben said gently. She stepped down slowly, her bare feet touching soft earth for the first time. The ground was cool with dew, and the sound of birds rose from the trees nearby. She looked around, her eyes wide, taking in the green fields, the tall trees, and the bright blue of the sky. Ben led her through the small dirt path toward his home. It was a simple house made of stone and wood, with a sloping roof and wide windows. Around it grew rows of plants, some bearing small red fruits, others lined with green leaves. Mira's gaze kept drifting upward. Above them, the suns were not harsh like on the market world. Only one sun hung in the sky, casting a gentle golden light. The clouds were painted with soft colors, pink, gold, and faint purple. She stopped walking without meaning to, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Ben turned and followed her gaze. "First sunrise?" he asked. Yes, she whispered. Then take your time, Ben said. She stood there for several minutes, the sunlight warming her face. In the mines, time had no meaning. Day and night were the same underground. She had never felt a day begin before. The light seemed to touch not just her skin, but something deep inside her. When they reached the house, Ben opened the door and stepped aside. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of baked bread. The main room had a table, 2 chairs and shelves with old books. A small kitchen stood to the left, with jars of spices and dried food. This is your home now, Ben said. Mira stepped in slowly, her hands brushing the smooth wooden table. She looked at the books on the shelf, their covers worn but cared, for she had never held a book before. Ben brought her a cup of water and set it down. You can rest or explore the garden outside. No one here will harm you. She nodded, still unsure of how to move in a place without walls closing in. After she drank the water, Ben took her outside to the garden. The plants grew in neat rows, with small signs marking their names. He showed her how to pick ripe fruits and place them gently in a basket. Mira followed his example, her fingers brushing the smooth skin of the fruit. At one point, she stopped and held a red fruit in her hand. It feels strange, she said. That's because it's fresh, Ben replied. Food tastes different when it comes from the ground, not a storage crate. They worked in silence for a while. A breeze moved through the leaves, carrying the smell of earth and flowers. Mira closed her eyes for a moment, breathing it in. It was nothing like the stale, metallic air of the mines. Later, Ben prepared a small meal with the fruit they had picked. Mira sat at the table watching as he cut and arranged the pieces. When he placed the plate before her, she took a bite and froze. The taste was bright and sweet, unlike anything she had known. It's good, she said quietly. Ben smiled faintly. There's more like that here. After the meal, Ben gave her a small set of simple clothes. They were soft and clean. She went to a small washroom to change, running her fingers over the fabric. It felt light on her skin, not rough like the rags she used to wear. When she stepped outside again, the sun had risen higher. The mist had faded, and the fields beyond the garden shone in the light. Children from the village were running along the path, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Mira watched them from a distance, unsure if she could join such simple joy. Ben noticed her watching. In time you can meet them. For now there's no rush. She nodded, though part of her wanted to walk closer. The rest of the day passed slowly. Ben showed her the well where they drew water, the storage shed for tools, and the small path that led to a stream nearby. Mira walked that path in the afternoon, feeling the soft dirt under her feet. She stopped by the stream and crouched down, watching the water move over smooth stones. She touched the water with her fingertips. It was cool and clear, reflecting the sky above. For a moment she felt something she could not name, a lightness, a sense that maybe the world was not only made of pain and darkness. When the suns began to set, Mira and Ben stood outside the house. The sky turned shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow, we'll start small work in the garden, Ben said. Mira looked at the horizon one last time before going inside. She thought about the sunrise she had seen that morning. It was still bright in her mind, a reminder that the world could be more than cages. That night, she lay in bed and closed her eyes. The hum of the ship was gone, replaced by the soft sounds of wind through the trees. For the first time, she hoped to see the next morning's light. Morning light slipped through the small window in Mira's room. She woke to the sound of birds outside, their song soft but lively. For a few moments, she simply lay there, feeling the warmth of the blanket around her. It was still strange to wake without someone shouting orders or the clang of metal tools. When she stepped outside, Ben was already in the garden, pulling weeds from the soil. He greeted her with a nod. "Breakfast first," he said, pointing to the table on the porch. There was bread, a bowl of fruit, and warm tea. Mira sat and ate quietly. Ben did not push her to speak. He knew she was still finding her place in this new world. After the meal, they worked together in the garden. Ben showed her how to use a small hand tool to loosen the dirt and plant seeds. She copied his movements, sometimes glancing at him to make sure she was doing it right. Hours passed in this way. The sun rose higher, and a gentle wind moved through the fields. When they stopped to rest, Ben poured water into 2 cups and handed one to her. "You're learning fast," he said. Mira looked at him, unsure how to answer. Words came slowly to her, as if each one had to be found deep inside. "It is different here," she said at last. Ben smiled faintly. "Different can be good." She thought about that. In the mines, different often meant dangerous. But here, different seemed to mean safer, calmer. Later that day, Ben brought out a small, wooden box. Inside were thin sheets of paper and a stick of charcoal. He set them on the table. "I'm going to teach you to write," he said. Mira hesitated. "Why?" "Because your voice is not only the sound you make, it is also the marks you leave behind. Words can travel far even when you are not there." She picked up the charcoal and studied it. Ben showed her how to form the letters of the common speech. Her hands moved slowly, and some letters came out crooked, but she kept trying. When she made her first clear word, her name, she stared at it for a long time. "Mira," Ben read aloud. "Now you've put yourself on paper. That's the first step to being heard." A small, almost hidden smile touched her face. It was the first time she had felt her name belonged to her. In the days that followed, her voice began to return, little by little. She asked more questions. She laughed once, a short, surprised sound, when Ben told her about the time he accidentally planted an entire row of weeds thinking they were vegetables. She began to speak about simple things, how the sunlight felt on her skin, how the taste of fresh fruit was strange but pleasant. One evening, as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, she sat across from Ben at the table. Her hands rested on the wood, her eyes fixed on the cup of tea before her. "There is something I want to say," she began. Ben looked at her, waiting. "I was in the mines since I was a child. I do not remember my home. I do not remember my parents. We worked under the ground, digging for metal. If you were slow, there was no food. If you fell sick, you were left behind. Speaking was dangerous. If you spoke, you lost time. If you lost time, you lost your place." Her voice was steady, but her hands tightened slightly. I stopped speaking. It was easier not to be noticed. Ben's expression stayed calm, but his eyes carried a quiet weight. "And now?" he asked. She met his gaze for the first time. "Now I am speaking." They sat in silence for a moment, not because there was nothing to say, but because the air between them was full of meaning. The next day, Ben took her into the village. People greeted him warmly, and though they looked at Mira with curiosity, no one was unkind. He introduced her simply, "This is Mira. She's a friend." Hearing that word, friend, made something shift inside her. It was not a title of ownership, not a label of work. It was a word that meant choice. At the village workshop, Ben showed her the simple machines they used for farming. She touched the smooth metal handles, feeling their weight. The blacksmith, a tall man with kind eyes, showed her how to pump air into the forge. The warm glow reminded her of the mines. But here the heat was controlled, not threatening. Over the next weeks, Mira practiced speaking more. She told the children small stories she made up, and they listened with bright eyes. She helped an older woman in the village carry baskets of herbs. Each time someone thanked her, she felt a quiet pride. One evening, while they sat outside watching the sky, Ben asked, "Do you miss anything from before?" Mira thought about it. "No, only the idea that there might have been more." Ben nodded. "There is more. You're finding it now." She looked at him. "You gave me my voice back." "No," Ben said. "You always had it. You just needed someone to listen." From that night onward, Mira spoke freely when she wanted to. Her words were still simple, but they carried weight. She began to dream, not the dark dreams of chains and dust, but dreams of green fields and open skies. She understood now that her voice was more than sound. It was the proof that she was alive. Morning light poured through the windows of the small house. Mira woke slowly, feeling the quiet calm around her. She stretched her arms and looked outside. The garden was bathed in soft light, the plants moving gently in the breeze. Today was another day to learn, to grow. Ben was already outside, working with a small tool in his hands. He looked up and smiled when he saw Mira step out the door. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, stepping down to the soft earth barefoot. The ground was cool under her feet, and she took a deep breath. The fresh air filled her lungs, different from the stale tunnels she had known. Ben handed her a small metal spade. "Let's start with the basics," he said. "Digging, planting, watering. Farming is simple, but it takes patience." Mira took the tool and began to dig into the soil. At first, her movements were slow and awkward. The earth felt different. From the hard rock she had handled in the mines, she had to learn how to use her strength without hurting herself. Ben watched her quietly. "You have strength," he said after a while. "But it is not only in the muscles. It is in knowing how to use it." She looked at him, curious. "Strong. Hands without control can break things. But gentle hands that know their power can build life." Mira thought about those words. In the mines, strength had meant survival, pushing through pain, ignoring fear. Here, it was different. Strength was not just force, but care. As the days passed, Mira grew stronger. Her arms became steady, her hands sure. She learned to plant seeds in straight rows and water them just enough. She learned which plants needed sun and which liked shade. One afternoon, Ben showed her how to fix a broken water pump. The machine was old and rusty, but with careful work, it could be saved. Mira watched as Ben loosened bolts and cleaned parts with a rag. "Try it," Ben said, handing her a small wrench. Her fingers closed around the tool. She tightened a bolt slowly, surprised when it moved easily. She worked with steady hands, following Ben's instructions. When the pump began to hiss softly and water flowed again, she smiled. "I fixed it," she said softly. Ben nodded. "You did." This was new to her, being able to repair something, to bring life back to broken things. It was a power she had, never known she could have. In the village, people began to notice Mira's changes. She helped carry baskets of vegetables, mended fences, and shared small smiles with neighbors. Though she still spoke quietly, her presence grew stronger. One evening, a young girl from the village came to the house. Her name was Lila, and she was curious about Mira. "Can you teach me?" Lila asked. Mira looked at her and smiled. "Yes." The next day, Mira took Lila to the garden. She showed the girl how to plant seeds and care for them. When Lila dropped some seeds in the soil, Mira guided her hands gently. Lila laughed when a small worm crawled nearby. "Is it dangerous?" Mira shook her head. "No, it helps the plants." Lila's eyes were wide with wonder. "You know many things." Mira felt proud. She was no longer alone. She had something to give and someone to give it to. As the sun set, Ben and Mira sat outside. The sky was painted with colors of orange and purple. "You are different from when I found you," Ben said. Mira nodded. "I feel it, like something inside is growing." "Because it is," Ben replied. "You are finding your strength. Not the strength to fight alone, but the strength to help others." Mira looked at him, her eyes clear. "I want to help them. Those still in cages." Ben smiled. "That time will come." She thought of the slave market, of the faces behind, bars. The memory was sharp, but no longer painful. It was fuel for what she wanted to do next. The next morning, Mira woke with new purpose. She dressed in sturdy clothes Ben had given her and stepped outside. The garden awaited, but so did the future. Together, they would bring hope to others. The day had come for Mira and Ben to leave the quiet village behind. The sun was just rising, casting soft light over the fields and trees. Mira stood by the door of the small house, holding a bag filled with supplies they would need. Her heart was steady, but her mind was full of memories and questions. Ben approached quietly. "Are you ready?" he asked. Mira nodded. "Yes, it is time." The walk to the ship was quiet. Birds sang in the trees and the wind moved gently through the grass. Mira looked back once at the village. Faces of friends she had made appeared in her mind. They had given her a new life, but now she wanted to bring that life to others. The ship lifted smoothly into the sky, carrying them away from the green world and into the dark vastness of space. Mira sat by the window, watching stars blink like distant fires. Ben set the course for the old market planet. It was a place Mira wanted to forget, but now she knew it was where her new fight would begin. When the ship landed, the hot, dusty air rushed in. The market was just as loud and busy as before. Traders shouted their offers, and cages filled with captured beings lined the streets. Mira's stomach tightened. She saw the same fear and sadness in the eyes of the slaves, the same tired faces waiting for someone to buy or leave them behind. Ben took her hand. "We are here to help," he said softly. They moved through the crowd, carrying crates of food, water, and supplies. Mira's eyes stayed on the cages, watching the people trapped inside. Some looked broken, others watched with quiet hope. Ben stopped at a trader's booth. "I want to buy as many slaves as you will sell," he said firmly. The trader laughed. "You must be rich, old man." Ben smiled. "Enough to free those who need it?" Mira watched as the trader began to count the credits. Slowly, cages were unlocked, and frightened beings were pulled out. Mira stepped forward, speaking softly to one of the freed aliens. The alien looked unsure, but Mira smiled and offered a hand. "We will take you to safety," she said. More cages opened, and soon a small group gathered near the ship. Mira helped guide them on board, showing kindness and strength she had never known before. Back on the ship, the freed aliens rested and drank water. Mira listened as they told their stories, tales of hard work, cruelty, and lost hope. She felt their pain, but also their gratitude. Ben turned to Mira. "You have changed more than just yourself. You have become a leader." Mira looked at the tired faces around her. "I want to do more," she said. "We must go back." The ship flew back to the market again and again. Each time, Mira grew stronger, and her voice carried farther. The small group of freed slaves began to grow, forming a community of hope. One day, Mira stood on the ship's deck, looking out at the busy market below. She thought of the first day she had seen the sun rise and how far she had come. Ben came beside her. "You have given them a chance," he said quietly. Mira smiled. "And they have given me hope. Together, they planned their next journey. The fight for freedom was only just beginning." The small ship floated above the green planet where Ben and Mira had found peace. Now it carried more than 2 passengers. Freed aliens filled the cabin, quiet but full of hope. Mira moved among them with careful steps, her eyes soft but strong. Years had passed since the first time Ben bought her from the market. Mira was no longer the weak, toothless girl who had sat in silence. She had grown into a leader, someone others looked up to. The village below had changed, too. New homes had been built, gardens had grown, and laughter filled the air where once there was only fear. Mira had helped guide these changes, teaching the freed aliens how to work, how to live freely, and how to find joy again. Ben sat quietly in the corner of the cabin, watching Mira. He was older now, his hair whiter and his steps slower, yet his eyes still held the same steady calm that had saved Mira years ago. As the ship landed, Mira helped the newcomers off. She greeted each one with a smile and a gentle touch. Some were young, some old, but all carried the weight of years spent in chains. "This is your new home," Mira told them. "Here, no one owns you. Here, you are free." At night, the village gathered around a fire. Mira stood before them, her voice clear and steady. "We have come from dark places," she said. "We have known pain and fear. But here, we build a new future. We help each other. We are strong together." The crowd nodded, faces lit by the warm glow of the fire. Children sat close to their parents, listening to Mira's words like a promise. Ben joined her by the fire. "You have done more than I ever dreamed," he said softly. Mira looked at him with gratitude. "You gave me a chance. I want to give others the same." Over time, their village became a beacon. Word spread across the planets about the place. Where slaves were free and hope lived, aliens came seeking refuge. Mira welcomed them all. She taught them skills she had learned, farming, repairing machines, speaking freely, and dreaming big. The community grew strong, built on trust and kindness. One day, a message arrived from a distant world. They asked for help to free slaves held in harsh conditions. Mira and Ben prepared to journey again. Before leaving, Mira stood on the hill overlooking the village. The suns were setting, casting golden light over the fields. She thought of the long road she had traveled, from the dark cage to this light-filled land. Her voice was steady when she spoke to Ben. "We must go. There are still many who need us." Ben smiled. "And we will go, together." The ship rose into the sky, carrying hope and freedom to new places. Mira looked forward with calm determination. No longer a servant, no longer silent. She was a leader. Of many voices, life beyond chains was not just a dream. It was a new reality she helped create,